It began like any other study session at the university library, bright morning sunlight spilling through the tall glass windows, illuminating the polished wooden tables and the neatly stacked books. The 22-year-old male narrator, earnest and attentive, had always been academically focused, yet today, something felt different. Across the room, the 42-year-old American Caucasian professor entered. Long black hair flowing gently over her shoulders, lightly tanned skin catching the sunlight, subtle freckles dotting her cheeks, soft laugh lines hinting at warmth and experience. Her curvy figure moved with a graceful, confident poise, and her dark brown eyes scanned the room with a blend of authority and approachable attentiveness. As she passed, her scent, a subtle, elegant perfume, drifted through the air, catching him off guard. The narrator noticed the quiet rhythm of her steps, the way her blouse lightly brushed her waist as she adjusted a stack of papers, the slight tilt of her head as she focused on arranging books for students. Every small detail was mesmerizing, from the way sunlight highlighted the gentle curve of her shoulders to the faint smile that tugged at the corners of her lips. For the first time, he felt the ordinary environment of the library transformed. Each sound, each movement, resonated with a heightened awareness. Their eyes met briefly, and an unexpected flutter rose in his chest. It wasn't just admiration for her intellect, though that was undeniable. It was the warmth and subtle humanity that emanated from her. She nodded politely in his direction, and for a fleeting moment, it felt as though the library shrank around them, leaving just the two of them in quiet acknowledgement. His pulse quickened, a mixture of nervous anticipation and curiosity, as he wondered if she realized the effect her presence had on him. He tried to focus on his notes, but his mind kept returning to the small details. The graceful way she adjusted her glasses, the soft brush of hair behind her ear, the confident yet gentle way she moved between desks. The subtle contrast between her poised professionalism and the quiet vulnerability he sensed in her eyes created a magnetic pull, drawing his attention more than any textbook or lecture could. Even the sound of her voice, as she spoke briefly to another student about a paper, seemed to linger longer in the air than normal. It was warm, measured, and slightly teasing, a tone that conveyed both authority and an unspoken friendliness. The narrator felt an internal mix of awe and trepidation, unsure how to navigate the growing fascination that coursed through him. This initial encounter set the foundation for the slow burn story. It wasn't a sudden spark, but a careful observation of her presence, the subtle ways she commanded attention without demanding it, and the quiet yet tangible attraction that began to form. Each small detail, a smile, a glance, a movement, became a thread in the complex web of emotions that would gradually pull them closer together, shaping the emotional arc of curiosity, tension, and eventual intimacy. The bright morning library, once mundane and predictable, had transformed into a stage for the beginning of a forbidden yet emotionally charged connection, one that promised both inner conflict and the slow-building warmth of a profound age-gap attraction. The day progressed, but the narrator's focus on study felt increasingly fragmented. The 42-year-old American Caucasian professor with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure, graceful posture, and dark brown eyes moved gracefully among the students, offering guidance and clarification. Today, however, the moments that would normally pass unnoticed seemed to stretch. Every gesture, every glance, carried a quiet weight. He found himself leaning slightly forward over his notes as she approached his desk. Her blouse, a soft pastel shade, caught the light as she bent slightly to examine his work, and he noticed the subtle warmth radiating from her presence. When she placed a hand on his shoulder to steady a book or to guide him toward a particular passage, the touch was brief, almost accidental, yet it sent a faint thrill through him. His pulse quickened not from impropriety, but from the intimacy of such a small, human gesture. Her dark brown eyes met his for just a second longer than necessary, and in them he saw a flicker of something unspoken, curiosity, perhaps, or a quiet recognition of the subtle energy between them. The bright library around them seemed to fade slightly as his awareness focused entirely on the warmth of her hand, the gentle inflection in her voice, the soft rustle of her hair brushing her shoulders as she adjusted to look at the page. Each movement was deliberate yet effortless, and he became acutely aware of the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the crisp smell of paper and sunlight. As she spoke, her words were soft, measured, and filled with nuance. She explained a complex concept slowly, her hand briefly gesturing to the margin of his notebook, brushing against his hand ever so slightly. The narrator felt a delicate tension rise in that fleeting contact, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty, as if the air between them had become charged with a quiet, magnetic energy. Every small laugh or nod from her seemed to linger, leaving him acutely aware of how alive and human she felt in contrast to the quiet, impersonal environment of the library. Even the subtle cues, the way her fingers rested lightly on a book's corner, the gentle lean forward as she listened, the tilt of her head as she observed his work, created an intimacy that was almost imperceptible but undeniably present. He found himself replaying these small interactions in his mind, wondering if she noticed the effect she had on him, and if so, to what degree. This part of the story builds tension and fascination. The emotional pull is not overt, it is delicate, grounded in gestures, glances, and unspoken recognition. The bright environment, the warmth of sunlight streaming through the library windows, and the gentle movements of a graceful, confident woman amplify the subtle attraction. By the end of the session, the narrator feels a growing sense of wonder and nervous anticipation. Each interaction leaves him more aware of her presence and the electric tension hovering between them, a silent dialogue of curiosity, respect, and emotional intimacy that lays the foundation for the slow-burn romance to intensify in the next parts. The library, usually a haven of quiet focus, seemed to blur at the edges as the narrator's awareness narrowed entirely to the professor. The 42-year-old American Caucasian professor with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure, graceful posture, and dark brown eyes leaned slightly closer over his notes, explaining a particularly challenging concept. Her voice, soft and measured, carried a warmth that made each word linger in his ears far longer than it should. Then it happened, a whisper. Not loud, not inappropriate, but unexpectedly intimate. Her words brushed against his consciousness, personal and teasing, acknowledging something about him that no one else had noticed. The proximity was disorienting. The warmth of her breath, the faint fragrance of her perfume, and the subtle brush of her hair against his arm created a sudden, electric awareness. Time seemed to slow, and for a heartbeat, the bright library felt like a private world. He could feel the slight rise and fall of her chest as she leaned closer, her long hair cascading gently forward. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows glinted off her dark brown eyes, making them shine with a combination of intelligence, playfulness, and something more subtle, more human. Her hand rested briefly on the edge of his notebook, steadying it, and for a moment, their fingers were close enough that the space between them felt like a fragile thread connecting two entirely different worlds. The narrator's heart raced, and a warmth spread through his chest, a mix of excitement and astonishment. The whisper had been so soft, so fleeting, yet its impact lingered, as if she had opened a door to an entirely new realm of connection. His mind struggled to process the intensity of the moment. The thrill of being noticed so intimately by someone so composed, experienced, and beautiful contrasted sharply with his own nervous energy and youthful inexperience. Even the smallest details were magnified. The subtle curve of her lips as she whispered, the delicate movement of her hair falling over her shoulder, the soft fabric of her blouse brushing lightly against her arm. Each element seemed to heighten the intensity of the moment. The bright, sunlit library, usually filled with the quiet murmur of pages turning and footsteps across wooden floors, receded into the background. All that existed was the warmth, the closeness, and the fluttering heartbeat of the young man at the desk. This moment marks the turning point of the slow-burn romance. It transforms admiration and subtle attraction into something deeper, more immediate, a private connection charged with emotion. The whisper is not a declaration, but an intimate gesture that heightens awareness, creating tension, curiosity, and longing. It leaves the narrator acutely conscious of her presence and the possibilities that lie beneath the surface of ordinary academic interactions. By the time she straightens and returns to her rounds, the narrator is left with a quiet exhilaration and a lingering heartbeat, aware that nothing will feel quite the same again. The ordinary library, the daily study sessions, all have shifted subtly, becoming a stage for a delicate, emotionally charged connection that promises to grow in intensity and intimacy in the chapters ahead. After the whisper, the narrator couldn't focus. Every lecture, every note, every glance in the library felt filtered through a haze of excitement and confusion. The 42-year-old American Caucasian professor with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure, graceful posture, and dark brown eyes had done something ordinary and yet entirely transformative. She had seen him in a way no one else had, acknowledged his presence with a whisper that lingered like an echo in his mind. Alone in his room, the narrator replayed the moment over and over. The soft cadence of her voice, the intimate warmth of her proximity, the faint brush of her hair, and the gentle tilt of her head. Each detail left an indelible impression. He felt the thrill of being noticed so personally, but alongside it came a deep unease. She was his professor, a figure of authority and experience, and he was young, still navigating his place in the world. The boundary between admiration and forbidden attraction had been crossed, if only in subtle, unspoken ways. He could not deny the magnetic pull he felt. Her confidence, her poise, the way she moved through the room with effortless grace. These were qualities that drew him in, made him notice every nuance, every expression. Yet that attraction was tangled with hesitation. Social norms, age differences, and professional boundaries weighed heavily on his conscience. He wondered whether she understood the effect she had on him, or if he was simply overanalyzing a fleeting moment. Even his memories of past interactions seemed charged now. The gentle guidance, the brief touches, the playful yet composed glances. Everything took on a new significance. He caught himself smiling at nothing, thinking about the way she had leaned closer, the subtle warmth of her hand, the almost imperceptible flicker in her eyes. He felt drawn into a quiet storm of emotion, exhilaration mingled with guilt and uncertainty. The conflict extended beyond propriety. He was discovering feelings that were confusing and exciting in equal measure. He wanted to linger near her, to bask in her attention, but he also feared the consequences of allowing those feelings to grow too boldly. Every day brought a heightened awareness of her presence. The way sunlight glinted off her hair, the gentle scent that accompanied her, the soft rustle of her clothes as she moved. Each sensory detail reminded him of the whisper, of the intimacy he wasn't sure he should have felt. This chapter of the story emphasizes the inner turmoil that defines the slow-burn romance. The emotional tension is subtle, grounded in reflection and heightened awareness rather than overt action. The narrator's heart races at memories and small gestures, yet he remains respectful, hesitant, and deeply human in his response. The bright library and sunlit environments are mirrored in his heightened perception of warmth and light, amplifying the contrast between desire and restraint. By the end of this segment, the narrator understands that his fascination has shifted into something deeper, a mix of admiration, attraction, and emotional conflict. The whisper was not just a fleeting moment. It was the catalyst for a growing, complicated connection, one that will unfold gradually as he navigates boundaries, hesitation, and the undeniable allure of an experienced, graceful, and captivating professor. The days that followed were a delicate dance of proximity and restraint. The narrator, 22 years old, found himself acutely aware of every subtle gesture of the 42-year-old American Caucasian professor with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure, graceful posture, and dark brown eyes. Their interactions, though entirely professional on the surface, carried an unspoken intimacy that neither could fully ignore. Each study session became a tapestry of small moments that resonated far beyond their immediate significance. During one session, she leaned over to explain a particularly tricky concept, her hand brushing lightly against his arm as she pointed to a page in the textbook. The touch was fleeting, yet the warmth lingered, spreading through him in a quiet, electrifying wave. Their eyes met briefly, a shared understanding passing between them, unspoken, tentative, but deeply felt. The bright sunlight streaming through the library windows highlighted the graceful curve of her shoulders and the subtle smile tugging at her lips, making it almost impossible for him to focus on the notes in front of him. Laughter became a bridge between them. A small joke about a confusing theory sparked a genuine smile on her face, the kind that reached her dark brown eyes and softened the professional veneer she usually maintained. His own laughter felt lighter in response, a shared rhythm that made the library feel warmer, more intimate. It was in these moments that he realized their connection was not just physical or aesthetic. It was emotional, human, and profoundly comforting. He noticed the subtle details more than ever. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gentle tilt of her head when listening, the way her voice rose slightly in amusement. Each detail was a thread weaving them closer, creating a delicate web of emotional intimacy. The narrator's heart would race at the simplest gestures, a fleeting glance, a soft nod, the warmth of her presence as she moved past him to assist another student. These small, shared moments also carried an undercurrent of tension. The age difference, the professional boundary, the social propriety, all weighed on him, creating a mix of longing and hesitation. Yet in the safety of the library, amid the sunlight and quiet, those concerns seemed manageable. The laughter and brief touches allowed them to explore their connection in a human, YouTube-safe way, building trust, comfort, and emotional depth without crossing lines. By the end of each session, the narrator would leave with a sense of quiet exhilaration, replaying their interactions in his mind. Every small smile, every gentle touch, every shared laugh was a step in the slow, careful building of something emotionally significant. The intensity was subtle but undeniable, a tension that simmered beneath the surface, promising deeper connection in the chapters yet to come. This part of the story emphasizes the warmth of intimacy, the importance of small gestures, and the way emotional connection can develop gradually. It deepens the slow-burn romance, showing that meaningful bonds are built not through grand declarations, but through the quiet, human moments that linger long after the library lights have dimmed. The connection between them deepened, subtle but undeniable, as each study session passed. The narrator, 22 years old, felt the pull of the 42-year-old American Caucasian professor with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure, graceful posture, and dark brown eyes more acutely. She had become more than just an instructor. Her presence had become a quiet, comforting force that drew his attention even when he tried to focus on the textbooks before him. During a particularly bright afternoon, as sunlight poured through the tall library windows, they sat side by side reviewing notes. Their desks were close enough that the space between them felt charged with a silent electricity. When he leaned forward to clarify a point, she instinctively leaned slightly closer, her hand brushing the edge of his notebook. It was an unassuming gesture, yet the warmth and weight of it lingered, leaving him conscious of every millimeter of proximity. Her dark brown eyes met his with a steady, quiet intensity, acknowledging the connection without words. There was no teasing whisper this time, no overt declaration, just a mutual recognition, a delicate understanding of the emotional tension simmering between them. The narrator noticed the subtle details, the way her hair caught the sunlight, the gentle curve of her shoulders, the faint smile lines that revealed the depth of her experience and warmth. Every glance, every breath, felt purposeful yet natural, a dance of restraint and unspoken desire. The emotional intimacy of these moments was profound. They shared quiet observations about their studies, punctuated by small, meaningful gestures. A light tap on his hand to emphasize a point, a nod of reassurance, or the way she allowed her chair to drift slightly closer under the pretense of examining a page. These gestures, innocent on the surface, carried an unmistakable depth, a sense of trust, understanding, and mutual recognition. The narrator felt a mix of exhilaration and restraint. He was captivated by her mature beauty and confident presence, by the subtle ways she communicated warmth and attentiveness, yet he was acutely aware of boundaries and propriety. The age gap, the professional roles, and social expectations created a delicate tension, making every small touch, every fleeting glance, feel both thrilling and forbidden. The bright environment, the sunlight glinting off polished tables, the crisp scent of books, the soft murmur of other students, amplified the intensity of these quiet interactions. There was no need for dramatic declarations. The connection was built in the subtleties, the silent acknowledgments, and the shared understanding that passed between them. By the end of this session, the narrator felt a profound sense of emotional fulfillment mixed with anticipation. They had reached a peak of unspoken understanding, a stage where words were almost unnecessary, and the energy between them spoke volumes. This quiet intimacy set the stage for the final resolution, a warm, human conclusion where admiration, attraction, and respect coalesce into a deeply satisfying emotional connection. The tension that had been building over weeks finally found a gentle release. The narrator, 22 years old, felt the presence of the 42-year-old American Caucasian professor with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure, graceful posture, and dark brown eyes settle into something warm and familiar. Their previous encounters, the whispers, the fleeting touches, the shared laughter, had created a quiet intimacy, one that did not need grand gestures to feel complete. It was during a bright afternoon study session that the subtle culmination of their connection became palpable. She leaned over a textbook, her hand brushing against his as she pointed to a passage. The touch was lingering, but entirely natural, a signal of trust, comfort, and human warmth. Their eyes met, and for the first time, there was no hesitation, only recognition. The intensity that had simmered in earlier interactions transformed into something steady and affirming. The narrator felt his heartbeat slow, replaced by a warm, steady confidence that they had crossed an emotional threshold together. Every detail heightened the moment. The sunlight spilling across the polished wooden tables, illuminating her graceful posture. The soft hum of the library creating a cocoon of quiet. The subtle perfume that mingled with the scent of books, lingering as an invisible thread connecting them. Her dark brown eyes, full of warmth and intelligence, held his gaze with a balance of confidence and vulnerability, a reminder of both her maturity and her ability to connect deeply with another human being. They shared small, intentional gestures, a reassuring touch on the shoulder, a brief hand hovering near his as they reached for the same pen, a subtle smile acknowledging the private understanding between them. These interactions, once charged with uncertainty, now conveyed a profound emotional intimacy that needed no words. The narrator felt a deep respect for her as a person and a profound appreciation for the connection they had nurtured, built on trust, subtlety, and mutual understanding. This moment also carried closure for the internal conflict he had felt. The excitement tempered by hesitation, the forbidden allure balanced by propriety. He realized that the age difference, the professional boundary, and the social expectations were not obstacles but context, elements that made their connection nuanced, careful, and meaningful. The story resolved not in dramatic confession, but in the quiet acknowledgement of the bond they had built together. By the end of the session, there was a sense of completeness, a feeling that the slow burn had reached a satisfying warmth. They parted with lingering glances, subtle smiles, and a shared understanding that transcended words. The bright environment, the sunlit library, and the natural, human interactions had transformed ordinary study sessions into an emotionally charged narrative of connection, trust, and respect.